Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning. I promise you it won't be as mind-stretching as the earlier presentation. My presentation is more rigid in the present and what we get up to as a university press. We don't normally sponsor conferences, partly because university presses don't usually have a lot of money to throw around, but it seems to me that the title platinum sponsor is reassuringly expensive. So I thought it sounds good, and my colleague Kate assures me that it's great value. So this seems like a good thing to be continuing with. She also took the trouble to write me some extensive notes for this presentation, which I've completely ignored. So, but thank you for the effort. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about what university presses get up to, particularly Manchester, and to mention a few things that we do, which is mainly publish books. And in talking about these books, I'm going to talk a little bit around some sort of key topics that I think you'll be interested in. One of those is open access. Another one's about collaboration. I'll come back to AI. I thought it took a long time to appear in this morning's presentation. It's certainly very present in lots of people's minds and occupations, and also about collaboration and trade publishing. So I think you all know about what it is to live and work in the North. What I particularly like about being in Manchester is that there are many fine educational institutions. The University and Manchester Met, between them, probably have approaching 100,000 students, I think. That's the two big enterprises there. They also have very fine libraries, and if you didn't make the tour of the poetry library, do visit it when you come back. There's great opening hours. It's kind of sort of a hidden jewel in Manchester. And we also work with across the city and the universities with an activity called Creative Manchester, which involves poetry publishers and creative enterprises across the University of Manchester. And we get involved in all sorts of things which bring together disparate creative groups. And I think that a lot of our enterprises, we realize, are actually collaborative. And one of the biggest collaborators we have as the University Press is actually with our own library. And so it brings me to the first thing about how we make the University Press publishing work. Most university presses, unless they have Oxford or Cambridge in their name, are actually subsidised. Maybe you can't see it, but it is subsidised in some form or other. And in order for them to do what they do and do it well, they do need to find many routes to funding. And of course, one of these things is selling their products, just like commercial publishers. But open access, to use a phrase you just heard, is, yes, it's definitely very much with us, but it's very unevenly distributed, particularly within the humanities and social sciences, where I don't believe there's enough funding to support all of the publishing needs of open access. We're mostly a books publisher, and we have a small selection of journals that are now all diamond open access, so no APCs. So these 5 or 6 journals we publish them because they have a strong association with the university. The university is a co-funder to allow the publishing of those with other institutions. But we've we've been involved in open access book publishing since 2008, I think. And we've just published our 300th open access title, which is pretty good going for a medium-sized press. And it's this title here, you can see it on the screen, Renaissance Skin, and the art history book. And it's written by Evelyn Welsh, who's the Vice Chancellor of Bristol University, and has a very famous daughter called Florence Welsh, Florence and the Machine. So we're hoping that she's going to get this on her social media fairly soon. But this book would not have existed as an open access book without significant funding from several sources. And it's full colour throughout. And it's just to give you an example, we do somewhere between 10 and 15% of our output is open access books. So for say 200 books that we do, we'll do maybe 25, 30 some years, but they don't represent the same equivalent percentage of revenue. In fact, it represents something like half of the revenue. So even though a book publishing fee is relatively high, can be as high as say £10,000 or more, this book, in fact, was significantly more than that to produce this. And the way in which we make up for the potential loss of revenue on open access books is that we do produce print copies, and in this case, we know there is a demand for a print copy of this book, and we make some profit on this, which then goes back into publishing lots of more niche academic books, which is our main output. So we managed to make the need for open access and the demand for open access from the market, from the libraries, and from the funding councils, balance with those books that we publish without open access funding, which is most of them, because open access funding isn't available. Although there is obviously an imperative for funded research from the UK Research Council and so on to help them fund it, I think that mandate doesn't come in until much later than for the journal's requirement, because there simply isn't enough money in the system to support it. So that's part of our dynamic there. We have, in addition to making a university press sustainable, you'll find that most university presses that are resilient and sustainable and adaptable, that they do other things other than book publishing. For example, they might do journals publishing, they might do testing or assessment. There's usually something else that helps them out if they're not just directly funded, say, by their library or institution. Or I think in the case of Princeton University Press, a huge endowment, but it's just for the press. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a business imperative for them to run an efficient business. So for us, what we've been doing over the last few years is to expand into what we call academic trade publishing. Academic trade is distinguishing it from what I would call trade trade. So we don't publish cookery books or salacious kiss and tell biographies and so on. But we do publish books that might interest the general public. And I brought along a more recent one from here by Vince Cable, former Member of Parliament, Lib Dem, and actually before that he was an economist. He has a PhD in economics from Glasgow, I think. And he's just written a book on the decline of the US, essentially, or Western influence in global business terms, and the rise of China and India. And it's an example of a book that we see as fulfilling our mission as a university press, but also finding a way to help bring in revenue to support those other activities we do. A lot of the university activities are about cross-funding, the things you want to do and things that are more profitable. And this is a way in which we do that, but also filling, I think, social responsibility agenda by widening our market and increasing access to information and knowledge that otherwise might not be available. So typically these trade books are reasonably priced. So between maybe not £10 anymore, 15, 20, £25, aimed at the individual purchaser. And you predominantly in print. Print is an interesting issue. The book in print is a very durable format. Like Monica's talked earlier on, it's a 2,000-year-old piece of technology that seems to work. You also mentioned that the printed page is very very easy to engage with, very familiar, and it's being recreated in this digital form. But it was print that actually saved at least Manchester University Press and many publishers from going under during COVID, because individuals went to buy print copies, which was great for 2 years. And COVID was, oddly enough, great for publishers across the board, partly because of this. What we've also recently found is that within the recent buying patterns of institutions, we've also found that there's been a slight turn towards acquiring print again, particularly in humanities and social sciences. And one of the reasons for this is it's a very stable format. So with the rise of AI and not knowing whether something is real, original, or imagined, a print book cannot be changed. And now some libraries are looking at their print collections for their archival value, as well as the fact that there's I think an enduring and perhaps a growing interest in the print format. People going into libraries and asking for and wanting to see a print copy of books. So we've been mining this academic trade theme, but also trying to take advantage of both our presence in the region, in the city, and within the university. So one of the themes of Manchester, as you'll be very aware, is one of music, and this book, The Art of Darkness, by a local sort of music legend, John Robb. We took this on after John had self-published it and was struggling to distribute it and to get it to a wider audience. So we didn't originally commission this, but we happened, because of our location and connections, to be able to work with John to produce a new edition and to distribute throughout the world. And it's gone on to sell tens of thousands of copies, which is great for everyone. We also had another great success recently with a book more specifically about Manchester and its musical and architectural and really about the rebirth of a modern city, which is Andy Spinoza's Manchester Unspun, which again has exceeded sales of 10,000 copies, not just locally, but it's done very well locally. It does help that Andy Spinoza his career is in PR, so he's very good at promoting his own book, so he should be. But it's also a truism that people, authors that know and use social media, use PR, they will sell more copies of their books. It just works. And another example of that is a local DJ Paulette, whose biography we did publish. It's an interesting one because she's very early instance of a successful woman and black DJ, not just locally but internationally, and she's a really interesting story to tell. That's just recently come out in paperback. So we've been able to mine these themes about Manchester-ness, about northernness, and so on. But we've also been able to work within the university very effectively. And I think it's really important if you work within a university, and you have a university press, that university press remains relevant to the university, but not only relevant, but visible, that people know you're there, particularly when we're having to publish over, in some cases, quite a limited range of subject areas. If you're not publishing a lot of journals, and you're probably not publishing science, and it's very hard to publish science outside of journals publishing. So we publish in things like history of medicine and science policy and so on. We don't do your mainstream science areas because we're not a big journals publisher. And most of our output is books, and most of that comes from humanities and social sciences. But we've managed to work with Jodrell Bank, which is associated with the university. We've got coming up with them. We work with the Manchester Business School. We have an anniversary. It's one of the oldest business schools in the UK. The 60th-year anniversary book coming out. We work with Manchester Museum, doing books. I think the last one we did was some Golden Mummies exhibition, and the Whitworth Art Gallery as well. And we work, as I've mentioned, we work very closely with the library. And I think it's useful to come back to the library because we wouldn't have done so much open access publishing if it hadn't been for the funding of the library. And the library more or less as a commitment to fund anything that we have under contract by the University of Manchester Author to make it open access, which I think is a great commitment. And we don't actually publish a great deal of Manchester-based authors because most authors choose a publisher that is most suited to their topic, so one of the strongest lists. But we publish probably around 10% or slightly less of our output is University of Manchester authors. So they fund that. They also co-fund, as I mentioned, some of the Diamond Open Access journals. And recently we did have one subscription journal, but it was the bulletins to John Rylands Library. I think those of you who are from Manchester know the John Rylands Gothic-looking building, fantastic place to visit. And it's a big archival library and reference library. And they've just this year agreed to fund that journal as a Diamond Open Access. So this year it became completed our collection that everything was Diamond Open Access. And so that's now freely available, and we'll be releasing 100 years of archive later this year because it was 100 years old last year. So there's 100 volumes of the bulletin. And more recently, we've been collaborating on other projects with them. And the most recent one is around how we engage with AI. And AI is possibly, to use some of the language we have over, an existential threat to publishing and possibly to libraries. Who knows, at least in where they involve humans. So we're engaging with them because unusually they're the only part of the university that has an AI group and a director of AI and research. And we're working with them and some of the team from Creative Manchester, Computer Science Department, and other areas to put together a project to get the university to fund a specific project that NUP wants to do, which is around putting all of our content into a broad large language learning model to try and develop our skills and tools and to drive efficiencies through our own business. And I think that's pretty much the way forward with AI. I don't think we should all be doing our own small projects somewhere. I think we need to be working across institutions and departments so that we can all upskill together and all learn together. And I think that if anyone comes out of these meetings, I think it's that commitment to collaboration and not be fearful of AI, which I think we all are. There's a lot of trepidation around it. And so AI for sure is eating not just our breakfast, but our lunch and dinner too at the moment. And it can be very scary, but it's very interesting to see this enduring power of print and the fact that continues. But we do need to be able to protect the output of creative processes, whether it's publishing or not, from, I think, unrestricted use of AI. And on that happy note, I've probably used that most of my time.